What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Ao, and thanks for joining us here for the news. A retired Taiwanese lieutenant general has been charged with spying for China and of even planning armed assistance in the case of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Now, this is the second such case in less than a month. Chris Gorn has been following this story, and he comes to us live from our newsroom here in Taipei. Chris, what exactly are prosecutors accusing this former officer of doing?
Well, Eric, the suspect here is retired Lieutenant General Gao Anguo, who is now considered the highest-ranking retired serviceman ever to be charged with espionage for China. 5 others, including Gao's girlfriend, were also indicted for violating the National Security Act. Now, specifically, prosecutors allege that Gao formed a pro-unification group that was paid by China nearly $300,000 US to carry out their work. Now, that work allegedly included using drones to identify potential invasion sites on Taiwan's northern coast and to simulate how radar tracking might be used in an invasion. They then allegedly provided that intel to Beijing and even promised armed assistance in a Chinese attack. Now, Gao has made no secret of his support for China's unification with Taiwan. He even has his own YouTube channel where he posts political commentary, often about unification. But for his concrete actions to try and make that unification happen, prosecutors are now seeking a sentence of 10 years in prison.
And Chris, as we said, this isn't even the first case this month of a veteran being accused of Chinese espionage. Are we starting to see a pattern here?
Yes, just 2 weeks ago, another case became public involving a retired military veteran and politician named Chu Hong-yi, who was accused of very similar activity. He allegedly gathered reconnaissance for China on targets in Taiwan. He allegedly was getting teams of people together to carry out armed attacks in the case of a Chinese invasion. Now, prosecutors have declined to comment on whether there's a connection between these two cases, and the Taiwan Defense Ministry, they say that as far as they know, no active duty servicemen have been involved in either case, and that no state secrets have been leaked. But with so many of these espionage cases popping up involving the country's veterans, many people here are naturally concerned. Eric?
Thanks for that explanation, Chris. That was Chris Gorn reporting from Taipei. Taiwan's Defense Ministry reported 35 Chinese aircraft and 6 naval vessels operating around the country in the 24 hours leading up to Thursday morning. 27 of those aircraft crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait, and the military says at least 2 drones circled Taiwan, while other aircraft entered the country's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. Now, this area is not Taiwan's airspace, but rather a buffer zone used for defensive purposes. This latest ADIZ breach is the largest single-day incursion so far this year. Donald Trump's nominee for UN ambassador has voiced her support for Taiwan's participation in international organizations during her Senate confirmation hearing. Elise Stefanik highlighted her previous commitment to U.S.-Taiwan relations during her time as a member of Congress, and she vowed to collaborate with U.S. allies to monitor China at the UN. She also reaffirmed her support for Taiwan defense aid. The Trump administration is expected to adopt a firm stance against China. During Trump's second term, observers will be closely watching U.S.-China relations and its implications for Taiwan. To learn more about what we might expect from Trump on Taiwan, our reporter Otto Brar spoke to Rory Daniels with the Asia Society's Policy Institute in New York.
President Trump has said a few things about Taiwan's defense. He expects Taiwan to invest more in its defense. Do you think that will become a sticking point in relations between the U.S. and Taiwan?
So this has been a long time President Trump initiative to ensure that any defense commitment that the U.S. makes, even a soft commitment like the Taiwan Relations Act, which says that we'll provide arms to Taiwan of a defensive nature to ensure the balance of military power across the strait, that any of those commitments come with a substantial investment by that ally and partner in their own defense. So is it a sticking point? I hope not, and I don't think so. I think Taiwan will do what it needs to do to ensure that President Trump is satisfied with its defense commitments. Another thing that Taiwan can do is to reframe this discussion. One part of this discussion is just about the balance of military power, like what arms is Taiwan buying, et cetera. Some of this conversation is about military preparedness. Is the Taiwan military up to the task of repelling a blockade, let's say, a likely scenario, repelling a blockade for a week or two until assistance can arrive from other places?
Several experts have said that 2025 will be the year when China escalates tensions in the Taiwan Straits. They have said that there could be moderate tensions in the strait that could lead to wider conflict. How do you think President Trump will respond to these tensions?
I'll say also that I agree with experts that 2025 is going to be a tough year for Taiwan. I do think that there is some kind of pent up frustration that Beijing feels due to the election of Lai Ching-te, who they see as an independent separatist. So I do think there's been some holding back while the US election was determined, and that holding period is going to be over. There's also a high value in Beijing for kind of testing and probing these responses from the Trump administration. What will the cabinet do is a great question.
And just to probe you on that last point that you made, in the new cabinet that Trump has appointed, there are people like Marco Rubio, who is a self-proclaimed China hawk, while there are some other officials who have very different opinion on relations with Taiwan. How do you think this internal dynamic in Trump's cabinet will inform Trump's foreign policy?
The overall policy of the Trump administration will be decided by President Trump himself with inputs from various members of his cabinet or highly influential people. And it's very difficult to predict in advance what mix of inputs Trump will receive in order to make decisions on these types of important strategic issues. So we know that Marco Rubio is very hawkish on China. And we know that incoming National Security Advisor Walsh is very hawkish on China. That will create some pressure inside the Trump administration to respond forcefully to any provocation in the Taiwan Strait. On the other hand, again, I think there is a huge influence of the business community, the international global business community, in Donald Trump's cabinet as well, and the tech community. And those people may advocate for a more moderate approach because their interests are just slightly different than the interests of a Senator Rubio or Senator Walsh.
That was Rory Daniels from the Asia Society discussing Trump's foreign policy toward Taiwan. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has held his first phone call with the Philippines foreign minister, telling him the Trump administration's commitment to Manila is ironclad. The State Department says the two diplomats discussed what Rubio called China's dangerous and destabilizing actions in the South China Sea, with Rubio stressing that China's provocations violate international law. Tensions are high between China and the Philippines, with increasing clashes in the sea, where both countries have territorial claims. An international arbitration court ruled years ago that China's claims there are baseless, but Beijing rejects that ruling. 1,500 more troops are being sent to the U.S.'s border with Mexico. The additional forces will join the 2,200 already stationed there. This comes just 2 days after Donald Trump began his crackdown on immigration. In its first days in office, Trump signed executive orders giving authorities more power to fast-track deportation and birthright citizenship and canceling all asylum processing appointments. This has left the future of thousands of migrants from across Central America uncertain, and they are now seeking asylum within Mexico.
Lo que pasa es que yo no puedo regresar así como tal a mi país porque yo soy perseguido político. Yo tengo problemas allá con la política y regresar a mi país es morir.
The Justice Department has also ordered the investigation of local or state authorities who interfere with these new immigration policies. Thailand's Prime Minister Pattanathong Shinawatra has shared an AI-generated video speaking in Mandarin to attract Chinese tourists.
亲爱的中国朋友们，在这个特殊的日子里，我很想用中文与大家亲切交流。
The video appears to be an attempt to address concerns about rising kidnappings of Chinese nationals in Thailand. In early January, a Chinese celebrity was lured to Thailand by fraudsters, and he was then trafficked into Myanmar to work in a scam compound. Thai authorities say they found and freed him shortly after that. Thailand is betting big on tourism from China after Bangkok relaxed visa requirements for Chinese tourists. Police are returning over $300,000 in stolen money to a string of cryptocurrency scam victims by teaming up with the exchanges. But the problem of crypto fraud is big and slippery, and some police feel that official pressure on them to stamp it out has gone too far. John Van Trieste reports.
Police arrest a suspected scammer, part of a big push to tackle a wave of fraud that's hit Taiwan in recent years. But by the government's count, most scammers never face justice. President Lai Ching-te says fewer than 10% of recent fraud cases have even been cracked, and he wants police to try harder. Some of the toughest cases to crack involve cryptocurrency, favored by criminals as a tool for laundering money. Police have been able to regain some funds thanks to a partnership with 4 exchanges launched last year. This man, identified only with the initial W, is one of 32 fraud victims who are starting to get back a combined $336,000 thanks to this teamwork.
其实很开心的，因为至少就是可以把部分钱拿回来，骗了大概300-400万左右，我们的一些备用金啊，还有就是房子的一些款项等等。
Exchanges say they are on the alert for suspicious transactions.
快进快出，或者是它比较有一些大额进出的话，这个的确我们在风险控制上面会去做一些参数上的调整。
But happy endings are far from typical, and even in the case of W and his fellow victims, the scammers themselves remain free. Still, some police say they're already stretched thin with scams, with tens of thousands of reports each year, and that pressure to do more is unreasonable.
赖清德总统还说，目前的成效他不是很满意，那大家还有很大的努力空间。我想这就是对所有警察人员的羞辱。
As tension builds between some police and top government officials, scammers continue stealing with impunity across Taiwan and the wider region, creating a headache for both those who make the law and those who enforce it. Fu Huahong and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Officials on Taiwan's Kinmen Islands have reached out to their Chinese counterparts in the nearby city of Xiamen to discuss the issue of trash management. Each year, hundreds of tons of trash is removed from Kinmen's beaches, and much of that floats across from China. Cadence Quaranta reports.
These are beaches on Taiwan's outlying Kinmen Islands, covered in plastic and other trash, much of which has been carried over by tides from China's Fujian province, just a few kilometers away. Some of the garbage comes from China's coastal aquaculture farms, like these plastic barrels that don't break down easily and can harm Kinmen's intertidal zones as well as its fish.
因为中国大陆现在发现说，这个海漂垃圾的这个保丽龙的严重性，所以开始禁止使用这个保丽龙，就改采塑胶的胡同。所以我们现在在海边看到的垃圾的大部分就是塑胶胡同。
Kinmen officials say there are hundreds of beach cleanups each year, removing around 400 to 500 tons of trash. But this has not been enough to rid the island of all the rubbish floating in from China. Despite the complexities of cross-strait relations, with China continuing to assert its claim of sovereignty over Taiwan, Kinmen officials have approached their counterparts in the Chinese city of Xiamen to discuss the trash problem, hoping to collaborate on finding a solution. And it wouldn't be the first time they'd cooperate on waste management.
目前在厦门市这个部分，他们是也有一些 AI 导入的人工智慧的这些监管船，会去了解这些垃圾海漂流的状况，那会做一些海岸上的一些捕捞的协助。
Some of Taiwan's other outlying islands, including Penghu and Matsu, have also faced similar problems with trash from China washing up on their shores, as has Hong Kong. And while officials work on trying to find a solution, there are those here who feel that the management of trash coming out of China needs to start at its source. Devin Tsai and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
And thank you again for joining us for What's Up Taiwan. Finally, check out these shots from the Art Shanty Project in the U.S. state of Minnesota. This annual event hosts art projects on a frozen lake for 4 weeks. I'm Eric Gao, and I'll see you later on TaiwanPlus News.